Well, the Acting Chief Constable, Judith Gillespie, is with me. You're very welcome. Is the PSNI we see today the police service that Patten envisaged?
Well, I think we're very much based on a policing with the community ethos, but of course Patten would have envisaged us having the support of the whole community. And the vast majority of the community do support us. That's evidenced by recent events, like, for example, the public meeting in South Armagh, where people there wanted to talk about antisocial behaviour. They wanted to talk about criminal damage and car crime and burglaries and issues of concern to the local community. And that's exactly where we want to be. But unfortunately, what Patten did not envisage was this remaining dissident Republican threat, this small number of people who want to drag us back. The vast majority of the community want to move forward to a normal police service. That's what we want to provide.
But surely a dissident threat was always going to be likely. You can't eradicate terrorism, and you've said that there's only a small number of people supporting them. So are you saying seriously that the reform process, that Patten sees the service not quite equipped for the threat that you face today?
Well, Patten envisaged a number of scenarios. And of course the numbers of police officers and the resources that we have were based on a normal policing environment. Patten didn't envisage either the credit crunch or the pressure on public sector finance. There were many other things that have developed since the Patten report was written. But undoubtedly, as a blueprint for public accountability of policing, the Policing Board has been an excellent example. We now have broad community representation and political representation on the board. The district policing partnerships have been a model of good practice, and many people across the world have seen the Patten report as an excellent blueprint for policing accountability and for policing with the community.
Well, which is your priority? Is it catching the bad guys, tackling terrorism, or building community confidence?
Well, it's all of those things.
Which one comes first?
Because, well, community confidence has to be the first. It's hard won and it's hard earned and it's hard kept. And recent public surveys would show that community confidence in policing is high, higher than many other parts of the UK, for example. But we have to keep that community confidence. In the coverage there, you talked about the use of certain police powers. And obviously we need to use our police powers very carefully, take into account the community impact that might have. But we still have a dissident Republican threat, and we do need to police that, and my officers need to use those powers carefully.
But it seems that perhaps they're not. I mean, the figures suggest 700 stop and searches for 5 arrests. You know, that's less than 1 in 100. That's what's happening in the Foyle policing area. And then when we look at South Armagh, we have armed, masked men taking over a town, and police officers withdraw. So you go after the people in the street where there's a likelihood of 1 in 100 arrests, and when you see masked and armed men, the police officers take flight.
We want to be in a place where Northern Ireland is a peaceful, normal society, where we don't need extra powers, where we don't need powers that are different to any part of the UK. But we need those powers at the moment. We're on record in saying that recently the dissident Republican threat has been very, very high. I need to protect my officers, I need to protect the community, and we need to use those extraordinary powers.
But why are you using extraordinary powers against members of the public walking about in the street, presumably, whose support you're seeking, and not using those powers against armed masked men taking over towns in South Armagh?
One can never measure what we have prevented or deterred. And clearly the vast majority of the community will understand why we need those extraordinary powers, and we need to use them very, very carefully. But we want to be in a place where we don't need those powers, and for that we need the broad support of the community. And obviously we can't do this on our own. We really welcome the support of the community. In particular, if you look to South Armagh, that very large bomb, we were helped in finding that with phone calls from members of the community, and that's exactly what we need. The vast majority of the community do not want this dissident Republican threat. They don't want this criminality, and we want to move on.
There seems to be an intelligence gap if you are having to stop and search so many people in one policing area that we looked at, and in other areas if you're relying simply on calls from members of the public to detect large bombs. There seems to be a huge gap in intelligence. Is that a major problem for you at the moment?
Intelligence is always going to be an issue. We've never had a perfect intelligence world, and it's always going to be a mixture of art and science. But the bottom line is we rely on community support right across Northern Ireland from all sectors of the community. And it's only with that community support and information coming in from the public that we can succeed. And I would certainly appeal for that, because very often it's that little detail that people think is insignificant that helps us to move forward.
The security sources and senior ones are telling the BBC at the moment that there's a strong belief that there is a second large device in the hands of dissidents at the moment. What is the level of threat?
Well, the previous Chief Constable is on record, and we are on record saying many times that the threat at the moment is severe. And we don't say that lightly. It is a severe threat, and it's a severe threat to police officers. That is the target. If you look, for example, at what happened in Derry in the last couple of days, where you had a police officer from the area serving the community in that area whose family were targeted, that was absolutely despicable. We want police officers to be able to live right across Northern Ireland and to be able to deliver a community policing service. As one of the members of the public said, that's exactly where we want to be.
But are they stopping you from doing that? It seems in some cases that they are.
Well, it was very clear from what happened in Derry over the weekend that the vast majority of ordinary, decent people in Derry want nothing to do with this. People came out in support of my officer, in support of his family. They want nothing to do with this criminality. They want to move on.
Now, you've mentioned resources. You said Patten didn't envisage the credit crunch, the resource squeeze that you find at the moment. Indeed, he did have a lot of money to play with in terms of reforming the police. But, you know, how realistically can you argue for more resources in the context of a region where, per capita, much more is spent on policing?
Every Chief Constable would want to have more resources, obviously, but I'm a realist, and we're living in a world where there is huge pressure on public sector finance. So we have to use the resources that we have wisely. The Police Service of Northern Ireland has a budget of £1.2 billion. We are a very well-resourced service, and that's why it's so important that we did the recent strategic review, which was covered comprehensively in the media. What we need to do is use the resources that we have more effectively. We need to be getting police officers out from jobs where they don't need police powers and get them back out onto operational delivery and make sure they're available when the public need them.
For example, preparing cases and preparing files, the occurrence and case management units understand that there are 100 officers tied up preparing files. Why is that sort of work being done by police officers, many of whom would rather be out on the beat?
Well, we've had long negotiations with the Public Prosecution Service as to how we move forward in that, and we would hope very soon that there will be progress that will release police officers from that type of nugatory administrative duties. And it is about that. It is about getting police officers freed up from unnecessary bureaucracy. Of course, this isn't just a phenomenon that's exclusive to Northern Ireland. Right across the UK, the Flanagan report recently identified the amount of bureaucracy that police officers are tied up in. And it's about making sure that we free them up from that unnecessary bureaucracy.
And if policing and justice is devolved, would you have any concerns that indeed the bureaucracy would in fact increase? Because to whom would you be answerable? Would it be the Policing Board, a Justice Minister, or a committee at Stormont?
Well, if we go right back to the beginning of this conversation and the Patten report, which made it very clear that the powers of the Policing Board should not in any way be diluted by the devolution of policing and justice. I think the Policing Board has been a success story. They hold us publicly to account. Their public meetings, they ask challenging questions of the Chief Constable and his team, and I think that's something that should continue in the future. But of course it's very important that we work together to make sure that there is unnecessary bureaucracy all eliminated from the system, and whatever systems are set up, whatever systems are agreed by the politicians in the future, that we all make sure that any unnecessary bureaucracy is taken out of that system.
Judith Gillespie, many thanks indeed.
You're welcome.